This is Take Flights with Mark Whittle.
Guys, you ready?
Yeah, man. I thought we'd started.
Officially, we're starting.
Are you cold?
I'm actually getting a little bit warm.
This is what
I'm
happens
going to
when
leave it on now.
20% body fat, mate. Sponsored by an outdoor bloody clothing company.
Mate, Through Light Boys are top lads, aren't they?
Yeah, they're outstanding.
I did mention to them when I went there that I was going to come and see you, have a chat with you. So,
Oi, 6 months later, here I am. Chasing me. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
I have to say thanks to George Cruz as well, your former teammate, because he was the one who introduced us in the first place.
Did he?
Yeah, do you remember
George Snooze, yeah. He's doing...
Is that the nickname?
Yeah, Snooze or Schnoz. It's kind of back around his nose, okay. And whenever he used to speak in sort of line-out meetings, it's not the most riveting sort of meeting to have. So he kind of taught people to sleep. So that very good guy, doing some good things as well.
Yeah, big fan of what they're doing at 4-5. But yeah, also, mate, we haven't spoken about this, but I did meet you once before.
We've just been together for an hour socially, and you haven't mentioned this.
No, because I was waiting because I just wanted to get your reaction.
Yeah.
You won't even remember it, I imagine. It was the night before my wedding, and I stayed at Farmhouse in Soho House.
Yeah.
And me and my brother stayed there, and it was, I think, Faz, Danny Kerr, and one other, and you were sat in the the side bit where they let dogs in.
Yeah.
And
in the main barn, but
you said, just said hello really, but Faz knows my brother. And my brother rode the Atlantic a couple of years ago.
I do remember this now. Yeah,
about it. You were like,
was that the weekend we got snowed in there?
Yeah, my wedding was the day after. Managed to just about get it to go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, mate, it's worst places to be snowed in. You know what I mean? But that was like biblical, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was, so your wedding went ahead.
Wedding just about went ahead.
And I made a good account of myself.
Very good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
No, it's probably because you were friends of Faz. I was just like, all right, they're all right.
But I think you were in the middle of. It was either it must have been.
It'd be this week.
Yeah.
We'd always use the. It wouldn't be this time of week though, because you'd always get bollocksed Monday to sort of Friday, and you'd get the weekend off. It's the thing with coaches in like a down week. I don't know if you experienced it in football, but like as a player, you approach a fallow week or a recovery week or a rest week as like bit of light training, recover from the game at the weekend. Massage, recovery, lots of hydro, weights, get feeling good. But then coaches are like, oh, got no game at the weekend. The guys won't be battle hardened. So you end up actually training like harder in a down week than you would in a normal week.
Yeah.
But yeah, weekend off in the Six Nations was dreamy, just to catch up with the family, a little bit of respite. But yeah, Farmhouse, worst places to do it.
Yeah, it's nice. That was 2018. So what happened? What was that? What was the outcome of that Six Nations?
Worse than a long time, I think. We won. I leave that one off the CV. You see,
yeah.
It's funny. Like whenever I go somewhere now, they're like, so we've got former England Rugby captain or player Dylan Hartley here, and they go 2016 Grand Slam winner, back-to-back Six Nation winner, and then they forget the third year, and I forget it as well. I always leave that one off the thing.
Typical. We started this with a 2018.
No, but the good thing about it is, and this is what I try and say to everyone, off the back of that, a year later they go to a World Cup final. So it's like success, big bump in the road. Come fifth in the Six Nations, just above Italy. But like the tournament is a crazy tournament. On points difference, stuff like that, you can be second or fifth.
Yeah.
On points difference pretty easily.
Yeah.
And then after that fifth place, we go to a World Cup final. So I think it was a good thing to happen because it identified a lot of stuff that we needed to work on. And I suppose we had the environment to address those things and almost like a strategy to work on those things, because man, I played there for years, and I suppose this is where coaching, I'm just getting into it now, we'll just talk about whatever. You lose a game, it's like in football, you lose a game, but you never really identify why. It's just like a loss, and you go, we won't let that happen again. We started slow, but you never identify how to start fast. You never put a strategy in place to go out on a Monday morning, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and have a strategy to make sure you improve the start of your game.
Yeah.
Like we'd just go back to doing what we always did.
Yeah.
Whereas under Eddie, we kind of formed strategies. We identified weaknesses via stats, via video, and then the biggest sort of weaknesses we targeted in the week. Straight away after the meeting on a Monday morning, would be walking through that weakness, that identified weakness, then would be talking about it that evening. So the whole week would work on that weakness. And basically when they got to the World Cup final, that 2018 weakness was nowhere to be seen. So there's like a clear strategy on how to improve, which is cool, man. Like such a good way. It's hard. It's hard. But I've just made up my own question. I'm sorry.
No, mate, I love it. I love it. Do you know what's fascinating about that? It's because it's the same in life as well as when you ignore, call it a weakness or a failure or anything that you might be carrying baggage with or anything like that. When you don't look at it, it feels way worse. But the moment, it's like the monster under the bed, isn't it? You look under the bed, there's nothing there, you're fine.
Yeah.
So when you actually address your failures, there's such a weight off, yet some people find it too, whether it's too scary or too much to look at it.
I'm with you, and that's why I do chin-ups 3 sessions a week.
Do
like
you?
me, I train with my best mate who's 47 years old, and he's heavier than me. Like he's Samoan, like 120 kilo, and we've got wide grip chins, neutral grip chins in the program, and I'm like 115 kilo. And it's one of those things that we could just not do, but it's like it's in the program, so we've got to do it. And it's one of those weaknesses. We're actually getting better, and it's not actually so daunting to do them now. And I always talk to kids about this. It's like often like the right thing to do is the hardest thing to confront. The easy thing to do is to ignore. So I always say to kids like, you got to get up early and go for a run, the first thing, but then it's a bit wet. So you hit the snooze button, which is easy to do, right? But it's the wrong thing. The hard thing is to kind of get out of bed, get out there with the rain in your face and go for a run.
Yeah.
And it's even like public speaking, like I struggled massively, but you got to confront those demons. You got to get up and you got to stand on stage and you got to find a way. You just got to confront. And I suppose over time it becomes your comfort zone. Like the more you learn and you experience, it becomes comforting. So I don't know about chin-ups or going for a run. I don't think that will be comforting for me, but 100% agree. Deal with the monster under the bed.
Yeah. How many chin-ups are you doing?
Well, I did 4 sets of 10.
Did you?
Neutral grip, and then wide grip. I'm not going to lie, we have band assisted. We put like a little band around because wide grip's hard, man. Mate, that is hard.
Yeah. What, are you doing 10s on that as well?
Yeah, but we break those into 5s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did 5 sets of 5 yesterday, and I told you when I got out of the car, my arms are killing me.
You shouldn't be using your arms. It's your back.
Yeah, but it was them ones.
Neutral.
Yeah, neutral.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, elbows in.
Yeah, confront the monster, mate. It's good. And it won't be a monster anymore.
Yeah. I actually remember hearing Jamie Foxx saying it was pull-ups and press-ups. That's all he did for years. And he's incredible, Nick, yeah. I'm
sure he eats well. I'm sure he's got some decent genetics there as well.
Yeah, he will do. But, mate, you're saying you played on here for years. For those watching on the YouTube, you'll be able to see we're at the Saints ground. This is unbelievable. We're in one of the boxes here with the backdrop of the ground behind us.
Hey, we've talked about Through Dark and 4-5 supplements. Might as well give Warner Edwards a shout out as well.
Warner,
We're in their box, their gin bar.
We should have put a bottle on the table.
We can stage that. No, it's good to be back. It's a nice place. It's like I suppose it was kind of like home for me in a way. You haven't even asked me a question, by the way. I'm just talking about that. So I kind of left home at 16 to embark on a bit of an adventure, and I did a couple of years down in Worcester, like cutting my teeth, trying to be a professional rugby player. And I suppose I played here on this ground on a Monday night in the A-League sort of fixture, playing for Worcester against Northampton. And I looked at the facilities here, and I recognised a couple of the players in the team as New Zealanders, All Blacks. And compared to what I had, I was at a championship club in Worcester, a league down, and I just thought, I've got to ask the question. So I beeline for the academy manager, not on site, so my coaches couldn't see, like sneaky at the aftermatch sort of thing. I said, can I come here? I'm not really enjoying my time at Worcester. And they said 100%. And then within like 6 months, I moved up here. I live literally behind the stand.
Really?
And I suppose being away from my family and that, I just loved it. I kind of immersed myself in the club, the community as well. Like after playing here like 15 years, you literally know, you look in the stands when you're playing and you know that person from that shop, or they live there, or that's so-and-so's neighbour. It's a real community sort of club, which is unique in sport, you know, because we are in a city as well. Like, we effectively are a town. And I suppose when you go to a lot of sporting events now, like Twickenham, for example, it's so expensive. It's like £100 a ticket, and it's all filled with like corporate. They sell all the boxes out and all the hospo. And it's hard to get tickets. You know, it's hard for a dad to take his couple of kids along. It's a few £100, you know. Whereas here, you get people literally walking. They all live in Jimmy's End or St James. They all walk to the ground. They all work at churches or Carlsberg. You know, it's a proper sort of, I don't want to say blue collar, but it's a nice sort of humble rugby ground. And in terms of grass goes, there's not many grass pitches left in this world, mate. So, you know, respect that. That's a lovely place to play.
Yeah, it looks amazing. You had 250 appearances for Northampton in the end, was it? On the
251.
251.
250th, right?
Yeah.
This is, I suppose, a milestone game. My missus didn't even come. She was bored of it by then. But my dad was over at the time.
Nice.
So my dad probably, you know, he was never like a rugby sort of guy. Didn't push me. He worked 6-7 days a week, but he'd always come watch me play rugby on a Saturday morning. His truck would pull up. He'd stand behind the sticks, give me a high five, and then he'd go back to work. So he wasn't like a rugby dad. Didn't really push it. I kind of pushed it myself because I loved it. And I suppose when I went professional, he probably watched me play, you know, on one hand live, you know, 4 or 5 times, him and my mum, you know. So on the odd time that they came over, or I toured to New Zealand, they would come watch a game type thing. So towards the end of my career, when I suppose I had kids, he had grandkids, him and my mum came over a couple of times. But my dad was actually here on my 250th. And he used to love coming down here. He's got more friends here than me. Like, he'd make his way around all these corporate boxes. He wouldn't pay for a drink, you know. He actually wore my club tie, like he really milked it, which is fair play. Like, you know, he went for it. But so I'm driving into the game on my 250th, and Dad's like, "You nervous today?" I'm like, "Nah, it's just another game, you know. Only, you know, everyone else puts a number on it. It's just another game." Okay, so we had quite a bit of a talk, and then silence all the way in. And then we have the pre-meeting up in the gym before we, I suppose, go and warm up. And I'm kind of knowing there's going to be a shirt presentation, this sort of thing. I'm going to get like, someone's going to say something. Then my fucking dad walks in. I'm like, oh, you know, like it's sort of, this could get emotional sort of feeling in front of the boys. And he said some nice words, gave him my shirt. But the irony was, I went out in that game, and under the sticks down there, an old friend of mine tackled me. Basically, my career was done from that game. I played one more game on that sore knee, and I never came back. So the irony was, my dad presented me my shirt, doomed my career. And there's 2 other examples of him, I suppose, turning up in the UK. When Northampton, we went to the Heineken Cup final, 2011 in Cardiff. You know, amazing run, unbeaten all the way to the final. We go 21-3 or 21-7 up at half time against Leinster. Like, we're cruising this, we've got one hand on the trophy. Leinster come back and absolutely like steamroll us and win the game, so we lose this final. My dad's there in the crowd again, so as an omen, like my dad turning up the game's not good. 2014, I think, we go down to Cardiff, same stadium. My dad, surprised, turns up for the Grand Slam decider. England are going down there, and my dad turns up surprised, like. And we go down there and we get absolutely pumped again. So I said to my dad after that, no more surprises, like stop turning up. I know it's not true. He's not a bad omen. But the sort of 3 times my dad watched me play live or significant games were all terrible. Nothing to do with me, by the way, but it's just, I don't even know how we got onto that. But,
we'll talk about like your England career and stuff soon, because I'd love to get into that, and specifically the captaincy. But talking about your dad there, it's really interesting. I was similar. Like, I never wanted my parents to watch me play. I don't know, it just added pressure. But although you're saying he's a bad omen, am I right in thinking he gave you a rugby ball, which was what sparked your love of the game in the first place as a kid?
Yeah. These are the days. Like, how old are you?
I'm 34.
So you're same age. I'm 35, similar age, and we've both got kids. Like you compare like your upbringing to, bearing in mind we're young people, you know what I mean. But like maybe it was New Zealand, and maybe I hope the UK was the same. But we just didn't get things as kids. Did you get things? You know, we didn't go out places. Like we went places that were free. You went to the park and you played outside. You know, like it sounds really old school, but we just didn't get things. Like my kids go places now, they get shit wherever they go, and that's not my fault. Like it's just everything's affordable for one. Like we used to take sandwiches and pack lunches and water bottles with us now. Like our kids go out and like, I'm thirsty. It's like you just get them a drink or you just buy them a snack, and then it's all squished down the back seat of the car. You know what I mean? But like, so when my dad brought home this rugby ball in 1995, I'd never had a brand new thing. I'm second born as well, so all my clothes were hand-me-downs. But I got this rugby ball, and it was right when the Rugby World Cup was on in South Africa, and right when Jonah Lomu was everywhere. I think he must be 19, 20 years old, maybe even younger. But he was like that presence on the world stage of, you know, athletes where globally he's been talked about. So I remember being at school and kids, everyone saying they want to be Jonah Lomu. So it's the one name that we all knew. So kind of coupled with me getting my own rugby ball, and I didn't have to share it with anyone. My brother got a basketball, my little brother got a football. Neither of them went on to play in the NBA or the Premier League. But this ball became like an obsession. Like I've talked about it a few times. Like you probably never saw this when I played. I wasn't very skillful when it mattered, but like I had like a feel for the ball, and I think down to when I threw the ball, I had like a good natural feel for how the ball worked. And that sounds ridiculous, but you know, I suppose in football you can turn a ball, you can curve a ball, you understand how it's going to bounce, and just like Tiger Woods could draw, or what's the other word, fade a ball. You know, I just loved the rugby ball that much. I could do things with it. I just felt so comfortable with it, so it became an obsession. Ball went with me everywhere. Loved playing rugby, and it's easy in New Zealand because that's all you do. And then I come to school over here at 16. You know, it's every kid's hands in their pockets because it's freezing cold on a tennis court at lunchtime playing football. I get it, you know, but whereas in New Zealand we were on a tennis court or on a square of grass playing touch rugby with either a rugby ball, a mini rugby ball, or a Coke bottle filled with water, or a hoodie tied up in knots, you know, just a tennis ball, anything. And then like every PE session, all the PE teachers were kind of ex or, you know, wannabe rugby players, you know what I mean? So we didn't follow a curriculum. Like I work at a school now, and, you know, they do, you know, different terms, they do different sports, and you know, like cricket rolls into rugby, and then to hockey, and then to volleyball, and like we did it, every session was touch rugby, like, and then you've got like the Chinese exchange students, like they start passing the ball, and then I suppose when I came to England, I was like, the skill level was just completely different. Much like if you went to New Zealand and watched them play football, soccer, like when we played, when I played professionally here, like I've never seen the guys get as animated when a football came out for warm up. You know what I mean? They're more passionate about football. And guess who got picked last? All the Kiwis, all the South Africans, all the Australians, and like the pick your teams. And I was like, it really hurt me. Sent me back to school basically. But no, just in terms of like a base level of skill, like the kids, I suppose, in New Zealand, it's like religion, much like football here. You know, it's just drilled into you.
But you said you had like a natural feel for the ball. Did you feel like you had a natural talent as well? Like on your journey of playing, obviously you're doing it all the time. Was there a time when you suddenly thought, you know what, I could make a career out of this, or I could become a professional?
Yeah, I suppose that's why I ended up here, because I wasn't quite good enough in New Zealand. Like I played in a really good school team, like national champions, in the year that I suppose I left, and then the following year they won it again. Like, so that's quite competitive in New Zealand. And in a decade they won it 3 or 4 times. So really good rugby producing school. And I looked at the standard of the guys playing, and they were all better than me. You know, 4 or 5 guys went on to play professionally. They were all way better than me. And you know, at that age when you're not getting in rep teams, it's, in terms of your pathway and development, that's important. You need to be in the mix, and I just wasn't in the mix. but I still loved it that much. I thought, okay, so if I go abroad, and this is coupled with a bit of, I didn't really have a passion for schoolwork and exams, so it was a nice way to kind of get out of the formalities of those sitting exams. If I went on a gap year I looked at America and I looked at England, and I thought England's better, they play rugby there, so I can go to school there. But it was too expensive. So I ended up, my uncle just said, come live with me, go to school with your cousins, community college up the road. There's a rugby academy there, local rugby club's good. So I did that, went and lived with my uncle. And I suppose I always had like a dream or an aspiration to be a professional rugby player, because I'd come from this religion, in New Zealand, where like being an All Black and being a rugby player is, because you've got to remember, like, it's a small country, and what puts them on the map is their sporting prowess, and their top sport is the All Blacks. Like they're on par with your your iconic winning teams. If you go Dallas Cowboys, Chicago Bulls, the American football ladies soccer team, like they're huge. So that puts them on the map. So every kid wants to grow up and do that. No one wants to be a politician. No one wants to be I don't know, it's probably different now. People want to be YouTubers and gamers, but I'd still say like the dream occupation for every kid in New Zealand is to be an All Black,
But for you to like play in a great team, and you said 4 or 5 and went on to play pro as well in your school team.
Yeah.
Did any of them become All Blacks?
Yeah, so my captain did, Liam Messon, he won a World Cup.
No way. So
and
that's cool.
I always looked at him as the standard. And when I was at school, he was actually playing professional kind of sevens rugby for New Zealand at the time. So like, I'm there, like this chubby little white kid from out on a farm, and then like Liam was there, like this professional sort of athlete with a proper training program, like physically impressive. Like he used to go and get sprint training, plyometric training. He'd come to school and like he just wouldn't go to class. I mean, the headmaster was the first 15 coach as well. So he actually identified Jonah when he came through school as well. So he had this big sort of rugby presence, Mr. Grinter. So Liam was like this golden child. But that was the standard. And I looked at it and I was like, whoa, I'm nowhere near it. But then I suppose I come to England.
But how did you have because that's the stands you apart, right? To go, do you know what? I'm not up to scratch in New Zealand, but I'm going to go to England. Like, where did that idea even formulate?
So I saw it in a school newsletter, exchange student type thing. And that's where I looked into, because I was either going to leave school because I wasn't very good academically. I mean, I was capable, but I just didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed the social aspect of school, like many kids, But I struggled. I wear glasses now, and it wasn't until I was like 14, 15, they identified that I needed glasses. I was watching my brother play basketball one day, and my mum said, "Can you read? Can you not see the score?" type thing. I was like, "No, I'm squinting," and then they clocked that I needed glasses. So I was sat in class for 2 years at high school, like at the back with my mates. While they could do their work, chat, I couldn't do a thing. I didn't even own like a book or a pen at school, like I just dossed around. But I loved the teachers like me. I kind of managed to kind of worm my way out of many a thing. So school wasn't good for me in terms of that. So I thought if I bugger off for a year, or I go do an apprenticeship in carpentry. My dad's a builder, so I would have done something laborious, something with my hands. I enjoy that sort of thing. So I thought I'll delay that by 1 year, go to England, take my rugby boots, and we'll see what the rugby scene's like there, So all the whole time kind of knowing that my mum at 10 years old took me to the post office and she got me my British passport. And she said, "You'll thank me for this one day." And that sticks to me. And I suppose to come over to this country and play sport, or just to even get in this country on a British passport, is an amazing thing, So I've got my mum to thank for that. So I rock up here. I go to community college. I bring my boots. I go to local rugby training. I go to school rugby training. And I stick out. I'm different. First day of school, I think I went to school in flip-flops in the snow. I've never seen the snow before. I have seen the snow. I went to the mountains as a kid in New Zealand, but I've never experienced living in the snow. So I go to school in my shorts and flip-flops. I stand out. I'm a bit different. And I think in terms of a rugby presence, I was different as well. I'd come from an environment where just for comparison, I'd call it professional, and I went to an amateur environment. You know, for example, the rugby academy at the school I went to, it was in my schedule, and I turn up, there's only like 7 people there. I'm like, if this is in New Zealand, like there'd be 300 odd applicants trying to get in, you know. So I turned up, and then I suppose the way I played, I was quite vocal, because they'd been coached into us. It was very physical because of the environment I'd come from. I stood out. So as soon as you stood out, it's like being a northerner in the south of England, you know, bit blue collar, you know, spoke a bit different. And because I was from New Zealand, it was almost like my rugby education, prejudice, you know, in a positive way was good. You know, so when selectors were like, oh, who's that? It's like, oh, he's a Kiwi. Oh, is that why he's so aggressive or so vocal? And it's like, okay. So I got opportunity from being different over here, I suppose. And, you know, within a year, I had a couple of sort of academy invites and offers. You know, scouts in their long coats and their clipboards come around, make you feel good, tickle your ego. But it was cool. And within a year, I'd kind of made this sort of England age group team, which was good.
Wow.
So I suppose the question was when did I think I could make it professional? Mm-hmm. So I did that, played for England under 18s, and then I buggered off back to New Zealand on my return ticket. Yeah, done my year here, and my uncle then gets a letter, and he says it's from the RFU. Can I open it? And I got invited to an under 19 training camp in South Africa. So I was like, that's cool. That's like the progression of where I was, and it's in South Africa. I've never been there. Like, that's cool. So I sat with my mum and dad, and they're like, you can go back over. We'll pay for you to get back there. And bearing in mind that money don't grow on trees, in my parents, in my family, they paid for my ticket again, but this time a one-way ticket. Yeah. So this was the time that, like, if I go, you're embarking on professionalism, you know. And before I went, I'd met the Worcester Academy manager in my England under 18s experience, and he was the academy manager, and I said, can I come to Worcester? Bearing in mind, you know, can you pay me type thing? And I went on a promise of a contract. I got paid fuel expenses when I first went. They put me up in student accommodation. So it was all kind of sorted. So off I go from New Zealand for the second time on a promise, you know. So I went and done that. And I went to Worcester, and I eventually got a contract. You might have read this somewhere, but I got paid $4,000 a year. I don't know how that compares to your football early wages, your cobbler's contract. But I got paid $4,000 a year. And like, I tell all the kids this because I think it's important. I had to pay rent out of that, so, you know, 250 quid a month out of 333 quid a month. That left me with 83 quid a month, which left me with 21 quid a week to be a professional. But I couldn't text at the time because text cost like 50p. There was no FaceTime or Skype or internet call. I'd have to, you know, at least I could tell mum and dad that I was professional when I had a roof over my head. And I was really proud, you know. That's what I wanted to do. And, you know, if Instagram was around back then, I would have put professional rugby player in my bio, like all the kids do these days, you know. But there's so many sort of stories from that time at Worcester. So essentially, like at 17, I'm living by myself. I found a room in a house full of other professionals, which was great. But like, I was living on 21 quid a week, which is I couldn't do. So I remember I did many things from, like, I always tell stories about like how I used to steal things from Worcester, like anything from, like, because toilet paper costs money, right? Eggs, milk, you know, we used to take loads of stuff from there, but we needed it, you know. It wasn't taken for the sake of taking. Like, it was stuff to help us get by. And then I suppose I did pamphleting. I did glass collecting in a nightclub at 17. I couldn't pull pints because I was 17. At 18, you could, and so I did glass collecting. I cleaned gutters. I just did like odd jobs, you know, tea cutting vans and things like that. I remember so many different things. And I started eBaying as well. So when first team members left like a training top round, I'd be like, let's come with me. And I had this eBay account. I remember I sold like $4-5 grand's worth of kit on there. So I doubled my salary, you know. And I was like, right, this is how you do it. Then when I was playing for England under 19s, there might be some viewers that were customers of mine. You get fresh socks, fresh shirt, fresh shorts every game. Never sell your shirt. Like, my shirts were way too important to me. But like my shorts and socks, I'd wear my ones from the previous week. So I'd have fresh socks still in the packet, so I could sell BNWT, brand new with tags. And you'd get a higher premium. I was getting 80 quid a pair of socks,
Really?
you know. But that all funded, I suppose, my early days in Worcester. And then I sort of coupled that with the training that we used to do with a guy called Phil Richards, who, lovely man, but at the time as a 17, 18-year-old, horrible man. And I'm really thankful we had him, but he was an ex-military sort of PTI, and we did everything. Like, fitness wasn't like now, okay, lads, we're going to go out and we're going to do 3 sets of 50 shuttles on 10-second turnarounds, you know, like really refined. And sports science, it was like, right, see that tractor tyre, get in groups of 4, run that up the canal, and when I say stop, you can stop, and when I bring it back, you can bring it back. Stretcher carries, and because I was a prop at the time, I was probably about the same way I am now, I never got a ride on the stretcher, mate. Stretcher carries, you know, I remember like shoulders being red raw. We used to do things called, are they leper or leopard? Those crawls, military crawls.
Yeah.
The length of the field, and we all got 3rd-degree burns. Like, you know, when you get weeps on a graze, because of friction, pushing yourself on your knees. So we had all these kind of grazes, and I remember going to like an England under 19s training camp. You know, the 3 players from Worcester turn up, all with like these massive welts, and some infected. And like, what are they doing to you down there? And I'll tell you what they're doing. Like, they're built like a resilience and an engine on us.
Yeah.
We used to train at 6 o'clock in the morning in the gym because they didn't want to see, like, the first team coaches at the time and the PTI didn't want to see the academy floating about. And like, I remember doing sessions, right, that were like 10 sets of 10 box squats, supersetted with like 50-meter sled pulls. So like proper gnarly training, you know, like no sort of, I'm sure there's some sort of science to it, but in terms of like a training base and a mental resilience, we were just like a tough bunch of kids, and all sort of moved away from home. And I suppose when I came to Northampton, they doubled my salary. I got a free house. I got free food. We got a fruit and veg box each week. We got a meat pack each week. I had a free house. I got free boots, free trainers, and I doubled my salary. So I had all this money and I didn't know what to do with it, but it freed me up to be a professional. I was like, and then I went and sat in a change room of academy kids here. They'd just left school. They'd left their boarding house. And I'd lived for 2 years in Worcester, like working jobs. Felt like a grown man, you know. But straight away from that, I'd done my academy experience. So straight away, I was like, I'm not here to be an academy player. And I kind of aligned myself with a few older guys and just sat in their pocket. You know, I did what I was told, and I suppose I got mentored culturally by a couple of older guys. Not about rugby, but just in terms of looked after.
Yeah.
And the bloke I referred to earlier, my best mate, he was from Rotorua as well. So I grew up watching him play.
And he played here?
Yeah, so when he signed here, I kind of sidled up next to him and I said, I'm from Rotorua as well. Like, I know who you are. I used to watch you play. And then it turns out, like, I moved into a house next door to him. And then 5 nights a week, his son, Connor, who now plays here professionally, would come knock on my door at 6 years old and be like, dinner's ready. So home away from home, I found someone from the same background.
That's too
Took
much
me
to
in.
not be a chance. Like,
Yeah, it's
meant to be.
It's crazy. There's a hell of a backstory to it as
Yeah.
well. But like, his dad used to drive a bus, which my dad used to catch as an apprentice.
No.
And my dad remembers him and stuff. But in terms of like when I talk about this becoming a home, you know, Christmases, I never had a Christmas like with a family. I didn't do that. You know, I remember the academy boys at the weekend going home, get mum to do their laundry and they come back with shopping and stuff like that. Whereas I didn't have any of that, so I just immersed myself in this. And some of the older players, some of the Kiwis especially, because I was still a young Kiwi at the time, I latched onto them and they kind of brought me in and did Christmases together. So I built like a little family essentially. So when I came here, like, I'd already done my academy time, and I suppose this is when if I compare it to Worcester, I've done 2 years training on pitch 10 and the back end of Worcester, and not even wearing like official Worcester training kit because we were like a separate entity from the club. It was almost like a charitable youth program. They probably got like a tax relief sort of thing from it. But then I came here, and then my first pre-season, like I trained with the first team. So I'm like training with guys that I watched on TV. And I'm like, okay, this is good. Like this is what I signed up for. Yeah. And then the first game of the season, I start and I play. And I go on to play like 15 games that year for the first team. And my mates at Worcester are going, man, like you're on TV, like you're playing on TV. So I'd gone from like training proper grassroots in the middle of nowhere at Worcester to come into an environment where it was professional. There was a pathway for me. They invested in me and they saw me as the sort of the future here, and they gave me the opportunity. So man, like it wasn't easy, but like it was easy because I'd done the hard stuff, I suppose, at Worcester, you know. So
I remember speaking to Aldo Kane, and he said, on reflection, it always looks so obvious and easy and clear what the path was, but like when you're in it, it certainly doesn't feel the same way. Like when you look back, it's like, oh, obviously that Worcester thing led to that, and then that guy was from where I grew up, and that was all meant to be, and it was quite obvious. But at the time, you're like, it's still a graft.
Yeah, it's the mystery. I suppose, you know, when things go wrong as well. Yeah. Like in hindsight, you're like, why did we do that? But it's the exact same thing. Like, it's not always a positive outcome. You know what I mean? Even when it's a negative, and you like, I got into trouble loads. It's like, why did that happen? It's like, well, it wasn't obvious at the time. Like I didn't try to do the wrong thing. You know what I mean? So no, yeah.
But all those things that you spoke about, I love that because they shape you. You know, from the glass collecting to all of those experiences, like they make you who you are. Like I had a paper round at 12. Yeah. I pot washed, glass collecting, pool pints.
Oh, your paper round must have been different to mine because we look completely different, mate. I think you had a downhill one. Mine was up like that, and there's a gale force wind blowing rocks in my face. And it's football versus rugby here. Yeah. So what else did you do?
I did, so I did all the sort of, so the paper round, worked in a chippy, I worked glass collecting, waiter, pulling pints when I was 18. And then when I went to university, because my contract didn't go on at Cobblers. So I went to university at Leeds Met, played football there. Then I did all the nightclub stuff, so promoting the nightclubs, which again, when you're talking about, it's having a bit of creativity really. Like you're saying, you're selling the socks and the shorts to make a bit of cash. Yeah. You know, same thing. I remember I sold tickets, and then if the lads forgot to pick the money up, I wouldn't say anything. So
100%.
Then I'd have 600-700 quid in my drawer, which I would never have.
You shouldn't admit to that. Like they're going to come knocking, mate. Yeah. Debt collecting.
Yeah. But you know, those things don't happen, and I was really grateful for that. And they do shape you because a lot of it. And if we talk specifically to the training, how that like transfers to your training as a player, it's just doing things you don't want to do, like picking up those tractor tyres. Yeah. You don't want to fucking do it, but you do it. And by doing it, it makes other things further down the line easier. Like this podcast is called Take Flight. A lot of the stuff we talk about is the leap of faith, which is really backing yourself, having a bit of courage, but actually just doing something that's scary, like that, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable.
100%.
Cliche, but from you leaving New Zealand to come over here to the biggest ones, I think, you know, they in their individual instances probably don't feel that big, but to go over to Worcester and then again over to Northampton and say, can I come and play for you, mate? That's a leap of faith in itself.
It's just like you got to make your own luck, and I can't say too much now, but like post rugby, like I'm trying to make my luck in something else now. I'm asking the question, you know, I want to change. I'm just a bit comfortable doing what I do now, so I want to do something completely different. But what's the space? I can't delve too far into that.
But that's interesting because then you start. I'm similar in a similar space where you start to try and tap into that younger energy that you used to have, where you didn't give a fuck really, you had that naivety and you didn't know much, so you probably weren't even scared asking Northampton to go and play for them.
No,
maybe you didn't even.
Because you got nothing to lose though, right? So I think it's just applying that same sort of. As long as it's a considered decision, you know what I mean? It's not like it's a knee-jerk, it's a reaction to something. It's like, okay, if you're considering it, and it's almost like if you stay in your comfort zone, I truly believe this, and this is why I'm comfortable. I'm quite comfortable now. I'm comfortable how I work, how I earn, how I spend my time. But I think your comfort zone, you just don't grow. So your comfort zone becomes smaller. You don't step outside of it, and then all of a sudden you become like that person who just doesn't go out. You just do the same things. You mix with the same people. You don't learn anything. Like I just think the more sort of times you can dip into that learning zone, like and confront change, and like things like failure are in the learning zone as well. You know what I mean? You go over there, but then if you stay in your comfort zone and fail, you go, oh, I don't like that, and you stay in your comfort zone. Whereas if you're learning and you're failing, it's all, I don't know, it just, you grow. Yeah. It's not a scary thing to lose or to fail. You know what I mean? Whereas if you stay in your comfort zone, you lose and fail, your comfort zone gets smaller. You don't want to try that thing again. And I just think, like, if you can learn, and by learning, I'm saying, like, meet new people, go new places, try new things, educate yourself, whether it be, you know, pods, listening, reading, doing courses, like languages, anything. Just fucking do things that, because I don't know, like, I'm a year older than you, but you get to a point where I'm looking at 40, and after 40, I've got friends that are turning 50, like my best mate's near 50. And I'm like, man, I know 60 is the new 70, but time just flashes by. And when you got kids, you see that time just go, you know. And when I look at my time here, I had 15 years, and probably because it was conveniently comfortable, because I had a good career here and I played for England, and chopping and changing. If I'd travelled internationally, professionally with rugby, I wouldn't have played for England. So, but I look at that, 15 years is just one big blur. And I can't even put it together, you know. It's just, there's nothing to do with the head knocks or anything like that. But I'm just saying, like, life is short, and unless you mix it up and meet new people and try new things, you're going to lead a pretty, it's just going to fucking go.
Yeah. You're
it's not really that deep and profound for our listeners and viewers, but I don't know.
What would you say to people who are, you know, wanting to take a leap of faith themselves but feel resistance and struggle to commit to things or have belief in their ability to do it?
Well, it's like anything that's quite a lofty ambition, right? Like, so if you want to win the Premier League, or you want to win the Rugby World Cup, or whatever it is, or if you want to make a $1 billion business, whatever it is, it's a lofty ambition. So, like, for people embarking on career change and just anything that seems a bit scary, when you look at the lofty ambition, it's like, fuck, that's a long way away. But then if you roadmap things, and I work with kids that are aspiring to be professional athletes, you know what I mean? But the kids that I'm working with, they're 2 years away from that. So I'm like, okay, good lofty ambition, that's good, you've got to have that. But what is the strategy to getting there? Today, what's the first thing? Okay, the first thing is we make a strategy, and then tomorrow we apply the strategy. So effectively, it's like, you know, if you want a career change, you can't just go quit your job. I mean, that works for some people because it forces them to go find another job, you know what I mean? But, like, if you're in control, I don't see the point in putting yourself in a panic sort of zone, if that makes sense. So you control the narrative, whereas you set your lofty ambition, but then you roadmap it and you just take the first step. Like, if you want to lose weight, you don't lose 50 kilo overnight. I was talking about me. I need to lose about 10 kilo, but I'm not going to lose 10 kilo overnight. It's just, you know, small changes over a period of time. Then all of a sudden you reach that target, and it's not such a lofty ambition when you're, you know, look at NIMS, climb those mountains. You don't just sprint to the top, do you? You take step after step. So it's like day by day, you've got a roadmap, you've got a process. Even if you take a backward step one day, you take a forward step the next day. So when you talk about a leap of faith, I really like that. But when you actually look at what a leap of faith looks like, it's literally just a step forward. Or a process of writing something, you know, it's, and then committing to it. And then, man, it's not really a scripted sort of answer for you, but when things are far away, they can seem quite daunting, but when you break it down, it's like, I just need to put my first step forward, put pen to paper, and then just commit, keep doing.
Yeah, I love it, mate. It's funny, it's similar to, like, tipping points. I talk a lot about tipping points and try and grasp, are there specific moments in people's career that really made that drastic difference? But it's the same. It's the tipping point is actually more like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's more like the compound effect, and then finally one thing just tipped you over the edge, rather than a drastic tipping point. It's just, a cumulative years or events that have led up to that.
So a tipping point can be both good and bad, right? But like there's been a decision at some point to apply a strategy to get to that tipping point. That's what's crazy about that. So someone on a Sunday night or a Monday morning is going, oh, right, I want to do this. And then all of a sudden they build towards it, and all of a sudden it clicks and it goes really well. Or equally, if it's a bad sort of habit, you know, they wouldn't really consciously say, I want to do something bad. But it's all, like you say, an accumulated sort of... And when you talk about like athletes, for example, like, oh, they're really talented. Like Ronaldo, look at Ronaldo. Everyone says he's so talented. But like, man, you've played professionally with good and bad professionals, you know what I mean? And I'd say that like everyone are just hardworking. Everyone's hardworking people, and like you acquire your talent through hard work. You know, Ronaldo or even me from a young age playing with a rugby ball, I just started earlier than other people, so I've got a better feel for the rugby ball. Or Ronaldo was doing something as a kid that other people weren't doing, and he's just applied that same sort of work ethic to acquire his talent over a long period of time. And it's like we all sit here and go, oh, he's talented, but we didn't know what he's doing, what he's been doing for the last 20 years of his life, 30 years.
Yeah, in your book, I loved your book, by the way. It's so good.
Thanks, man.
It won like Sports Book of the Year 2020 or something.
Yeah, Times Sports Book of the Year.
Yeah.
Mike Kelvin did a great job. He lives down by you.
Oh, really?
Over the other side of the M1.
Okay.
And I won't disclose where he lives. But good guy. Like, he'd be worth a chat, man. Like, he's talked to a lot of people and done a lot of cool stuff. But I think
he write it with you or what?
Ghost with it. So we spent a lot of time like this.
Nice.
It was actually fucking hard work, you know. There's a lot of time that went into it. But he's got like a real skill, I suppose. He made me sound way more articulate than I am. And he's chucked a few phrases in that make me sound very clever and very deep and philosophical. But no, he's got a good skill, you know. And I think the best thing about Mike was he's a football man. No Hunger in Paradise. I think they did a documentary on BT about it.
Okay.
Basically about the success rate of football and how like the whole family's pinned all their hopes on these kids and whatnot. But because he wasn't a rugby man, I felt like, excuse me, he wasn't assuming what I said because he knows rugby. You know, like he had to actually listen, I had to articulate, you know, what exactly happens, which is cool. But yeah, as a process, she was pretty long-winded. You know, it was like it took about 3 years to do.
Yeah.
Because I was still playing at the time, and at the time I was England captain, so like me and the media, I was really conscious of whatever I said. And Mike was the media, in my opinion, because he'd worked for papers before, and his whole sort of circle were reported or journos, you know. So in terms of trust, like, if I'd known what I know now, I probably would have been a whole lot more open with him from the start. But you got to remember, on my day off for an England game at the weekend, I'd go meet Mike, sit in a pub and talk for 2 hours, 3 hours, but be a little bit holding back. Right. Like, is he trying to get is this going to be leaked to a newspaper? Like, what is he trying to get here? Yeah. But then by the end of it, I knew I was retiring. And I was like, yeah, this and yeah, that, like this happened. And so, I don't know, it was a process that it started as work, and I probably enjoyed more towards the end. And if I could go back and do it again, I'd do it differently. But I won't be doing it again. You know, that's my one shot, one kill. And I'm really, it's nice to get Times Sports Book of the Year, but I don't really advertise it. I'm not on a royalty basis, I don't think. I'm not going to sit here and push it.
You barely shared it when it came out, really. But like, I thought it was a fantastic book. So anyone who hasn't read it, I'm a big fan of like memoirs and autobiographies anyway. Like I read a lot of fiction books, and then now I'm at the stage where I get more from people's stories. Like you can really relate to that.
Have you got a favourite?
Favourite book? Sporting book.
Sporting book.
Similar to what you said earlier, it's always, you know, we were talking about social media before we hit record. It's always the last one I've read. Yeah. So it's yours at the minute.
Oh.
I read it again before we did this. I'll tell you what, Shoe Dog, which is not an autobiography,
mate,
but
it is.
My God. Well, I suppose it's a memoir.
No, sorry. I thought you said it's not an audio book, because I don't read, you see. I only listen. I love that. I've listened to that like 3 times over.
I've just got Shoemaker, which is the Reebok version.
Okay.
It's just come out. He's coming on the pod. He's like 70 plus, this guy who's created Reebok in Bolton. Obviously, then to compete with Nike and Adidas over the years.
What,
Crazy.
Bolton, UK?
Yeah.
I don't know the story.
It's crazy. But I've not finished that one yet. But yeah, Shoe Dog is one of my favourite books for sure.
Do you know why? Because it's a success story, and it's like it's chronological. It's like a timeline.
Yeah.
Like you grow with the book, and you see the guy like in their shitty old sort of office with the broken window next to the dive bar and the jukebox, and he sort of misses those days. And when he's worth 180 million overnight or something.
Mate, that final chapter, the last 2 pages, is just when he sells the business and then his bank account's got whatever in it, and then he follows that up with like his son died or something. It's just like fuck it, like a roller coaster.
Yeah,
isn't it?
but I just think like you grow with the book, and you know, like I'd see myself as a bit of an entrepreneur. Like it sounds like you are. Like we're talking about the sort of different jobs that you do. It's just such a cool story. You know, a guy found a way.
Yeah.
You know, the early days, being out in Japan. Do you know what? If they should make a film of it. I don't know if they have, but
they should. But like, do you know what's the best thing about it? And again, it's similar to your book. Is the things that you love when you grow with the book. You grow with the book because you feel the failures, and we all fail, and it feels horrible. I know we were talking about it earlier. But then to hear somebody else's failures and how they struggled, like he nearly went bankrupt nearly every year, but still managed to find somehow of getting another bank to give him money to get their next order of shoes and sell the next load of shoes. And yeah, it's
but again,
it's
like
crazy.
I suppose it's like a culture thing. Like in America, I certainly know like they almost celebrate that. It's like people giving it a crack. Where but I've done it so many times. I've been that close to trying to do something, and then I just go, no. I'm okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Like
and then
what?
I don't know, just like business ventures and ideas. You know, I've always got ideas, and I'm kind of thinking whatever I've done, and this is where I like love someone like James Haskell. We were talking about this before. Whatever he wants to do, he gives a crack, and he kind of he told me like a funny way of putting it. He said, "You know what?" He goes, "You're like a sniper. You sit there waiting for the perfect headshot, but the perfect headshot will never come. So I overthink things." Where he goes, "I've got an issue. Like I'm like a machine gun. I just fire bullets everywhere. So if we could find like a semi-automatic somewhere in between, you know what I mean?" But I admire people that give it a crack. You know, I think I'm quite a risk-averse sort of person, which just sounds weird because in many ways I'm not as well.
From your sporting background, like leaving New Zealand and
No, but again, it was roadmap, you know, like,
Yeah.
and what I'm going to potentially do next, like, there's a roadmap to it, there's a thought process, you know. Again, it's if you do it straight away, it's like impulsive and dangerous. But there was a roadmap and a plan, so even though you got the plan, it's never going to be. You still got to do the work. You know what I mean? Whether it's losing weight or moving halfway around the world, or training to be better at a skill, you still got to put in the hours. You got to put in the bloody work. You know.
And plans change.
Yeah, you got to
deviate. And,
So, I'm just looking at all the Saints going for their second meeting in 2 hours.
Bringing memories back.
Nice warm room. They've just had some lunch. I think they'll be falling asleep in there.
So I want to ask you about your relationship with Eddie. It's been very well documented. So just a specific question before we move on to more of your England career. I wonder, you spoke about in your book how he's quite a non-conformist. I've spoken with most of the people who have been on the show in some way or other are a non-conformist. I just wonder why, or whether that's why you got on so well. Because I feel like you're similar in that sense. And when I say non-conformist, I do feel like people get that phrase slightly muddled, and they think a non-conformist is someone who just doesn't want to abide by the rules and wants to do things their own way and just wants to stand out by being different, when I don't believe that's the case. I think a non-conformist is someone who just is prepared to ask questions, challenge the status quo, think differently to the man that came before him or the woman that came before him.
I just think someone that's a non-conformist is a considered person. I think there's so many negative connotations about a non-conformist, you know, like all the stuff you just said there. But I think someone that doesn't conform is considered, like they're their own person. They take the time to think about what's been asked, or they're not afraid to even just wear something different, you know what I mean? Because they're comfortable. They're comfortable within themselves. And if someone's comfortable within themselves, they often say what they think, which I think in any sort of group of people is rare, because people don't want to be ostracized or singled out, if that makes sense. So I think in a business sense, it's welcomed, because it doesn't happen. People don't challenge, and in team sport, traditionally, people don't challenge. I think that's changing though. I know coaching has become far more collaborative in terms of a little bit like we talked about $1 trillion coach, empowering the room to everyone to have a voice so that the team feels like they're making the decision, but then you've got the throne at the round table, that says this is what we're going to do. And Eddie's very much like that. So he's very much a non-conformist in terms of he does what he wants, not to be difficult. It's because he's confident in himself and he's a considered person, which I think I respect him. And that's ultimately why I've got different angles on Eddie, but ultimately I respected him because he's older. I come from a culture where we all talk about respecting your elders, but New Zealand, certainly Maori culture that I grew up with, that was very much sort of what we practiced. So one, he was older. Two, like you look at his resume, like the stuff he'd done even before coming to England, he's a well-respected sort of rugby brain. So two, and three, ultimately he gave me an opportunity. So when someone throws you a bone, I was on my ass, post 2015. I didn't think I'd play for England again, and he offered me a captaincy role. So I'm like, whoa, okay. Anyone that kind of throws you a bone, you repay that faith, So I'm a very loyal person in that respect. So, my relationship with him was born out of respect, really, because he had given me an opportunity, and I enjoyed his company. Interesting guy, because you see his kind of his edgy, hard side, and I saw plenty of that. But equally, he loves rugby, he loves the camaraderie, he loves sport. Did you see? He loves Liverpool, he loves tennis, loves all this different stuff. You see that this weekend, and then he tells little stories about what happened in South Africa in his time, or I used to work with this player. Some iconic players in terms of rugby. He'd be like, just tell you a hilarious story about that. So he wasn't like a coach, I suppose, that I worked with in the past. That's the coach's table over there. He loved the crack with the boys. He'd come sit on the table. He'd hold court. He loved James Haskell because he could story tell. Yeah. And I think probably that's where we might have got ourselves a role in terms of myself and James, that we kind of bridged that gap because we were relatable to Eddie because he had coached players similar to us because we played with the amateur professional crossover, whereas the kids today, it's so refined, the distant memory from what the game was, whether it be football, rugby, any sport, it's completely different. And he's a 60-year-old bloke. So I think we were kind of relatable to him. We were almost like the translators to the youth. Yeah. But what an interesting guy. And he's the sort of guy that probably introduced me to growth mindset at 29 years old. We talked about this before. I wasn't mature enough in my career. One, because I'd left home at 16, so I didn't answer to anyone. I was a grown man in my mind, and that's probably why I got into trouble a lot, because I didn't answer to anyone. I resented authority. I did it my way because I'd moved from New Zealand. I'd become a professional rugby player. I don't need help. And I said to you, I met with Steve Peters, famous sort of author and we call him a psychologist, sports psychologist. Or at 19, he wanted to help me, and I just didn't have the maturity to want to do that. And at 29 years old, once I'd kind of wised up a bit, I meet someone like Eddie, and he's like, mate, read this book. Here, look at this article. This guy's in camp today. Make sure you have a coffee with him. He's kind of constantly feeding me information. And for all the sort of 4 a.m. text messages I got saying, come see me in the morning, training not good enough today. And that flashes up at 4 a.m. It's like, my day's going to start hard tomorrow. Not a good way to sleep, But for all those sort of negative things where he stands there and looks you in the guy and goes, mate, you're not good enough physically. Basically saying you're fat. You're not going to last here. And we have this one-on-one conversation. I'm like, in a world where we're too sensitive, again, we conform and we don't want to hurt feelings and stuff like that. He sits there and looks you dead in the eye and goes, you're not good enough, mate. And he doesn't say, get out. He goes, you need to make a plan. Talk to Tweety, the head of S&C. Talk to Guzzy about your defence. He's like, if you make a plan with those guys, a strategy, and you'll be better, mate. And I look at myself 2016 physically to how I retired. Man, I'm different athlete. You know, I was an athlete at the start. I might have looked, you know, similar to one at the end. But in terms of something, he looked me dead in the eye, told me I wasn't good enough, but you can get there. And it was incredibly hard work. And I got there, you know, through him sort of guiding me. I mean, not with a carrot, it was with a stick, but I got there. And it kind of taught me that anything worth doing, like whether it's going to be business or life or sport, is incredibly hard. Like climbing a mountain, everyone can get to base camp, but how many people summit? You know, the higher you go, the harder it is, and you just need to keep pushing forward. And that's why you know, effectively I saw what winning was under Eddie. We won 18 games in a row, which is a world record. And I didn't enjoy much of it. I didn't enjoy the winning. I didn't enjoy the hard work at the time. Like mentally, it was, I've never been depressed in my life, but every sort of tournament or, you know, when I came home, it was like probably burnout, you know, physical, because, you know, rugby's a physical game as well. The training's physical. That mentally just been prodded the whole time. So that experience was, I'm so grateful I had it, because I had a taste, you know, because I played 70 games for England before that and hadn't really done anything, but 70 games is a lot of games, you know. But I kind of I finished my career, experienced the best of the best. And when you go back to Eddie's role in that, like, it was uncomfortable, but man, like, we had our good moments in between, you know. It was enjoyable at the same time, but it's easy, you always think of the negative connotations, but I'm so grateful that I got that. And he's the one that opened my eyes to growth mindset, reading more, talking more. And it wasn't about rugby and physically, you know. Some days he's like, go talk to QC. We're the QC, what's that stand for? Queen's Counsel, Queen's Court.
Okay.
You know, like a proper smart lawyer.
Okay, yeah.
Like that, we had a QC in camp, and go spend some time with QC, mate. And QC represented me a few times in rugby courts, and it's like watching something out of, is it Suits? Is that a
yeah
like proper held the room, like powerful when he spoke, and articulate because he was a smart man. He said, spend some time with QC, mate. And QC sat down with me, and we had a great relationship, because I basically kept him in a job because I had so many major bands. He can't have been that good, because he never got me off anything. No, he always mitigated or got things down for me, which is good. But Eddie, you know, go spend time with him. So this wasn't about rugby. It wasn't about my physical sort of, you know, this is about how I spoke to the room. And QC comes back to me and goes, every meeting, you know, I want you to align yourself with the head coach. It's far more powerful. So sit yourself in the room where people see you as a position of authority. So sit yourself near Eddie. So at the front of the room, Eddie's standing at the front. So if I need to speak, I can stand up. And he goes, I want you to finish every meeting with your words, you know. And basically, it was up to me what I said, but it was almost reaffirming what the coach had just said. So then the players, he was saying, see you as a person of authority, and they listen to you, which is, it's like deeply rooted psychological stuff, but just little things like that. You know, I had people helping me improve the whole time, whether it be rugby, physically, S&C, diet, you know, speaking, you know, how to stand, like things like that, how to use your hands. And I mean,
so good.
It was just, the whole experience was unbelievable hard work. But when I look back at it, do I miss it? No. Physically, no. Being prodded every day, no. But then someone asked me the other day, what do you miss? Don't miss the camaraderie. Don't miss anything. Don't miss the game. The one thing I do miss is being challenged every day. Like, you know that feeling of, you got to do fitness test on the line. You can get that sicky feeling. You're like, how am I going to go here? I miss being challenged every day. I miss having a higher power. And this is where super successful people create their own higher power, I think. I'm not that person, by the way. But like, I knew I'd have to say no to starters, chips and dessert on a night out, a date night with my wife. I'd just have steak and salad, because I had skim folds every Monday. The nutritionist would come to my house, drive 3 hours to come take my skin folds, because that was a good barometer of how professional I was, because I love my food and I'm up and down, you know. But I knew, having that higher power, I'd start saying no to things. I'd start training in my downtime, flexibility, mobility, yoga, started filling it all in, you know. And having that higher power, so when I went into camp and I whipped off my clothes and stood there, I knew my skin folds were good because I'd had that higher power to get me there. Basically, Eddie, you know, if your skin folds are terrible. I saw Luke Cowan-Dickey, who played against Scotland and Italy at the weekend. He was the third choice hooker at the time, and I was aware, like, I love him as a player. He's rough now, like a rough diamond now, but he was way rougher a couple of years ago. And he drove up from Exeter, and like, this kid's good. Like, I need to basically, you know, help me. There's almost another higher power when you got Jamie George and Luke Cowan-Dickey. They keep you honest, you know, make you do the work. But Luke came up, and this is a summer camp, and bearing in mind, I turned down a trip to Ed Sheeran had donated some tickets to my testimonial in Las Vegas. No. So I was all signed up to go on that, and Eddie called the summer camp, and I had to turn that down, so I couldn't go. And again, like, these are the choices or sacrifices we make in sport. Eddie said, you can, you know, I'm not, he basically, he didn't say anything. I knew I had to go to the camp, go to the summer camp, and I turn up because I know I've got to be, you know, skin folds are the first thing that the forwards do when they're there. You know, it's all part of the testing. And Luke Cowan-Dickey turns up, and he was sent home within 10 minutes of being there because his skin folds were too high. Like, if you're an England player, it's not just at Six Nations or Ultimate, it's all year round, you know. Like, and I don't know how high they were. I mean, you look at him now, he's a machine. He looks unbelievably fit. But that shook the foundations of that hotel. Like, have you heard, like, Dickey's been sent home? And bearing in mind, this is London to Exeter, so he's just driven 5 hours for probably half an hour, get skin folds done, he's sent home. So everyone's like, whoa. So that higher power was always present in my mind. And it's not just about skill, it's about everything, you know. So standards. The one thing I miss now is being challenged every day. And I suppose it's like creating your own sort of discipline or higher power.
When did you feel like most purposeful?
I think that's easy in that environment because you have a purpose, you have a job, you know, you're institutionalized. I think, probably the tail end of my career, again, having the maturity to, and understanding that this is my last shot at it. It's like you saying you work with like 29, 30-year-old guys when they mature up and they want to talk and they want to have extra help. And you think, how funny is it, like, the amount of senior professionals, that's why they're the best people to have in the club, because they're that desperate to hang on. They do everything. You know, you see them stretching, you see them doing every sort of recovery method. They're in the physio room, they're diligent with their homework. You know, they're such good role models to have around, because, you know, at 18, 19, where you go professional, like, that is a skill that you can't learn. You've got to be in an environment and learn it. So you can't practice that at school or at your local rugby club. So I think those sort of older people to have around environment are unbelievably powerful. You just can't have too many of them, because you obviously need the performance to go with that experience as well, which is where you get a tipping point, I suppose, in selection, where people get put out to pasture, not to stud. I was never put out to stud. But I don't know if that makes sense, but I felt most purposeful, I think, when I felt probably more enlightened, when I was more knowledgeable, when I'd read more things, when I'd experienced Eddie's sort of environment. So when coming back here, I suppose I got it a lot more.
Sounds like that's basically clarity. And that clarity came from Eddie being incredibly direct, and then I suppose you having belief in his ability to do it.
Yeah, but when you got clarity, right, like, it's so easy, because when you got clarity, you've usually got a roadmap or strategy to what, even clarity in my game. So no coach had ever sat me down before, and Eddie he was pretty honest. He goes, "You're not that good," as in, he goes, "But you're very good at these things," you know. And I'm like, okay, so kick me. And he's picked me back up.
How did that feel when he said that?
Oh, but I got it. Like my whole career was that. Like
Right.
I made a career out of being like ultra competitive, and I'm lucky that rugby's physical, and I was confrontational, physical, but born out of ultra competitive. Like I was verbal. I chatted all game, and like you'd be amazed that some of the best players in the world are the quietest people, and it's so frustrating trying to get talk out of them.
Yeah.
You need to communicate, you know. So he sat me down. He goes, right, physically you're not the best, but we'll work on that. That's what we talked about earlier. We'll roadmap that out for you. And then he goes, but all I need you to do in this team is a bit like Moneyball, right? He goes, I need you to be world class. I want you to be the best in the world. He goes, you're the best in England at the moment at throwing. But I want you to be world class at line out throwing, world class at scrummaging, and I want you to make good tackles, and I want you to clear rucks. He didn't say I want you to be Courtney Laws. I don't want you to have a YouTube highlights reel of tackles. Just say defensively sound, and I want you to clear rucks. And I've gone, it's the first time someone sat me down and just said exactly what I need to do. And it sounds so simple. Again, looking back, it's so simple, but like, this is your role. It's almost like if you get a job, where's my contract? What do I need to do? Maybe easy in the real world because that's what happens potentially. But in rugby, you're this all-encompassing team. The ball might come to you and you might have to kick it. But if that happens, it happens. But in terms of your focus, this is what I'm going to do. So I went, okay, so I'm there. I actually do all these things now, and that's all you want me to do. Okay. So when I went out to games and training, that's all I focused on. And it just freed me up. And the same thing happened with James Haskell. You know, you've always been compared to another player. I was compared to Jamie George for a long time in that period of my career. Jamie George did all the opposite of those things. Whilst he was a good scrummager, line-out thrower, competent, he was, Eddie wanted his hands on the ball. So when you come on the field, get your hands on the ball. When you come on the field, do this, Eddie, he set me down in a meeting. He was like, you're going to do this for 60 minutes, and then Jamie would come on and do his thing. So I'm like, cool, clarity. Everyone asked me, are you friends with Jamie George? Yes, teammates, you know what I mean? There's clarity in the group about who's doing what.
Yeah.
And I think narrative on the outside, this is quite a hard thing to manage, even when you're aware of managing it, is that this narrative always chipping away that you're not good enough because you only do those 4 things. You don't do the things that this other person's doing. And it's like just having the strength, I suppose, and this is where having a real direct sort of boss and respect that I had for him and trust. She just said, just keep doing what you're doing. And I knew if I came off a game, if I'd hit those 4 things, I could, I could walk in on a Sunday morning meeting and know I've done my job. I'd look at my stats, rucks hit, tackles made, 0 missed, 100% line out, 100% scrum. I'm like, cool, Moneyball, doing my job within the team. So
good.
That sort of clarity, man, like maybe enjoy it as well, instead of thinking I've got to go out and try and... Because otherwise, when you don't have clarity, people go off script in a game. Then you get people trying to get their hands on the ball to, I don't know, impress a coach.
Prove themselves.
Yeah, impress the media. I don't know who the fuck. But like when you got clarity, people stay on script.
Yeah.
Stick to the plan.
That's so interesting, mate. I love that so much. And it's understanding yourself. A lot of the work, again, that I do is about understanding who we are. It can sound quite deep, but just understanding that we aren't either the voice in our head that says you're shit, like you're saying, you're not good at the other stuff. Like that's not actually who we are. It's just a thought that's come up, probably because someone said you're shit at some point. You've believed it.
Yeah. No. I joke about that because I was very good at other things. I wasn't good at certain things, but I was very good at other things.
What were you very good at? I mean, from watching, I have my own opinions, but what do you think you're very good at?
I was ultra competitive. I was never quiet, so I was never beaten. And I think in a team, in a physical sport, like you want competitors, I fought for everything. I think I was emotionally invested. Like I loved it. I absolutely loved competing. I hated losing. And I think it's not a criticism of the game now. And there's certainly players out there, Alice Genge, Kyle Sinclair, I see them, people say hot-headed, but I see them as emotionally invested. Like they care. Like Owen Farrell cares. They care about winning. Like I was emotionally invested in every team I played for. I had a skill set. I was front row forward. All I had to do was those things I talked about really, really well. There was other people to be the stars, but like, fortunately for me, there was a salary for someone that did those things very well, and I did them. So the other thing, like a bit like, I don't talk about this very often, but it's going to sound back in my day, but a bit like my career, I always found a way to do things differently. I suppose before I had a family and things like that, I used to train in my own time. I didn't know what I was doing, but believe it or not, I used to go running. I'd go do extra weights. And I heard about Tom Curry and his brother. They go do bang weights in the evening, which is madness. You know, S&C coaches hate it. He should be recovering. But I'd go to a local basketball hall and I'd throw balls in the hoop. I lived and breathed. I wanted to be good, you know, whereas a criticism maybe of some players these days, I think they do what's put on for them here. I've done training today, but like, unless you got kids and a missus and another job, you got to do, like, what are you doing? Yeah. Recovery is important, but like, I don't know. I always felt like I was trying to do more. And Chris Ashton, who was in between clubs, recently, he's just gone to Leicester. He was using the gym at my house in my garage, and I was talking to him. He's an ultra competitor, like he loves winning, and a young player came round and saw him there, and the young player said to me, like, what's he doing there? Like, as in, because he was still contracted with the club. Chris was still contracted with the club, so he trained in the day. Then he came to my place in the evening to do some more. And the player, this other guy came round and kind of said, this is a bad way of telling a story, but questioned why he was doing more, because he'd already trained. And Chris heard this and said, well, that's the fucking problem with you young players these days. Like, you think you've done enough, and he's there training in the day, training in the evening, because he's got nothing else to do. Like, why not train? Yeah. Why not do more? As long as more is, you know, you're not detrimental to what you do. Yeah. But I think, when you ask, like, what was I good at? I was good at putting in the hours. And I think one of the early ones I had with Eddie was, along with what he liked about me, after he said I wasn't very good physically, not very impressive, he said, you've got a good mindset, which we've covered. And he goes, I want you to be he didn't know this about me at the time, but he goes, I want you to be the example of work ethic. So there was only 2 players older than me in the team, and that was Hask, might have been a year older, and one other. So when the oldest player became the example of work ethic, whether that be off the field in terms of diligence in note-taking, meeting, analysis meetings, you know, just general management, running around, being a captain, liaising, or whether that was physical work, like, I did it all. And I heard Danny Kerr talk about it recently, you know, tell stories about when the boys would come in on a day off, on a Wednesday, for recovery, and it'd be like full pancake breakfast, massages, you know, yoga, hot pod yoga, everything set up. But then the wrestling mat was there, like the Coliseum was set up for me. And the amount of coaches, wrestling coaches that I fought, S&C coaches that I fought, they even brought in, I forgot the guy's name, a UFC coach. He was an ex-fighter, now a coach. Brought him in. So like, I was constantly fighting. When I talk about fighting, you know, like ground-based conditioning. So like, where the guys were resting, it was like, Dylan, you need to work. 1, physically I needed to work because I need to improve. But 2, it was like more the statement of being seen to be working when the guys are resting. So like, Eddie worked unbelievably hard. Steve Borthwick, the head coach, worked unbelievably hard. I'm talking like from 5 a.m. to midnight, planning everything to the minute, you know, sessions planned to the minute. And I was very much the same, whilst trying to focus on my 4 jobs in the team and lead the team and play at the weekend. And I look back at it, and I was knackered going into games at the weekend, but I got through, you know, I survived. So yeah, work ethic was a good thing. And I think, again, it's sort of thing that's in you as a person. But again, like a skill that you learn. It can be trained. You know, at 18, 19, you might think you've done enough to get to your professional contract, but then you look at the World Cup winning All Black, who's 35. You turn up for training, he's already in the gym training, and he's wrote his own program because he's not letting someone else dictate. He knows what he wants to do. So like, we had a couple of All Blacks here, 2 brothers. They were exactly that. 33 and 35 when they're here, and they were the example of work ethic. Like, won 2 World Cups, you know what I mean? Like, legends of the game. And you think they've got some sort of like magic potion, but they're first in, not always last to leave, but they just drove their own careers effectively. So, but then I think work ethic's sort of thing that's drilled into you maybe from your parents from an early age, you know, not wiping your ass for you effectively. I remember getting home from school and making my own dinners and stuff like that. Or I remember, I don't know what I was doing at the time, but you talk about my high school experience, seeing Liam Messam, the future All Black, knowing that he was doing plyometric training. I don't know what the fuck plyometric training was, but I'd get home because I lived out in the sticks. I'd go for a 3 kilometre run, you know, just a 3 kilometre run. But I think from 12, 13 years old, I was doing those sorts of things. I was practicing, like consciously thinking I've got to put the work in. And I did everything from, I remember a scaffold pole at home with 2 tires, you know, on the side, like deadlift, like trying all that stuff. Like, it was absolute rubbish. But my dad being a builder and us living rurally, we always did jobs, you know, and I was my dad's helper. Like, he does credit me amongst my 2 other brothers as the best helper. Like, oh, I just love work. And I see it with my daughter now. Whenever I'm doing a job at home,
She wants help.
she's always hanging around, you know.
Aww.
When I'm in the gym with my best mate, she's in the gym, like hanging on the ring. So I'd like to think I'm like instilling, like, it's a good thing. Like, I'm not forcing her to do
example.
it. Yeah. So she's always going to have a good association with working, doing jobs, like getting pleasure out of it. And, you know, in the gym, you know, it's a good place to be.
Yeah. It's so good. Mate, I've got 2 questions and then we'll go and eat.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's very important that we go and eat.
You good for 2 more?
Yeah.
And just on that, like, I love the work ethic thing, because I remember watching something about Kobe Bryant. Chris Bosh was actually talking about him, saying, I think they'd come together for the Team USA, like for the Olympics.
Nah, weren't they playing each other?
It might have been. So, well,
And I think in basketball they turn up and you can warm up.
That's it.
Before the warm up.
Yeah,
you know?
before the warm up.
Yeah, tell the story.
Okay, so he was obviously there to try and make himself look uber competitive and set the standard. So set his alarm for like 6 a.m. or whatever it was, and he wanted to go and do a session before the session, and then before they even played against each other or whatever the competition was. Got out of bed, got downstairs, was excited, thinking he's going to beat everyone down there and show how hard working he is. Kobe sat there eating his breakfast with ice on his knees already, because he's already trained at like 4 a.m. or something. So he was doing like 3 a day is already, but that was like at the end of his career as well. So I think it's underestimated, like the work ethic that people have, and I don't think it's necessarily there. But I think you're right; it's instilled at a very young age, like your uphill paper round at a young age.
Yeah, but I think you take all those people take enjoyment from it.
Yeah.
Like, can I tell you the Kobe story that I heard?
Yeah,
very
yeah.
similar to
Mate,
that. It's probably why it's slightly different. But I think before a game, you can turn up and, you know, basketball's really weird. Turn up wearing what you want, you know, like they do their own thing. But Kobe was there, and this guy, the same thing, wanted to show Kobe he meant business. He's playing him that day. So he got there before the warm-up, but Kobe was already on the court. He's like, shit, right, I'm going to go out. And then he reckons he warmed up for ages. Like, he gave it a good amount of time. Yeah. And then he was like, he then thought, I'm going to stay even longer and do even more. And Kobe just kept staying there, doing his thing. And then he just thought, fuck it, this is actually going to become detrimental. So he took off, you know, showered, went back to the hotel, and they played late that evening. After the game, he's gone up to Kobe and gone like, man, what are you doing this morning? Like, unbelievable. Like, what you... He just said, I only stayed that long because you were there. So Kobe wasn't going to be, it wasn't even about the work. Yeah. It was about like the psychological warfare of like the impact that he wanted on his competitor.
Yeah, so he'd already won. Yeah. He'd already won before the game started. But that's like Mike Tyson when he said, as soon as you look at the canvas before the fight, I know I'll beat you.
Really?
Yeah, so just before they're about to fight, he's looking at them. Yeah. That's why you see a lot of fighters today, UFC and stuff, they just won't even look at they won't even engage in that psychological warfare before the fight. Yeah, they'll just look at the canvas. Whereas like Tyson was like, if we eye contact and you break it, look down, I've already beat you.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool, man.
So wait, 2 more. All right, this is one that was off the back of something I read in your book. So after the World Cup 2011, you can feel free to like add a bit of context to the story of what happened there. You said you went on a 5-year process of personal realignment. Yeah. And it seems to be consistent with the people I work with. You know, you mentioned like the 28, 29-year-olds around that time, when you kind of like, some people call it find myself or whatever. You realise there's more to life than what you saw before. You might have a perspective shift. So I'm just fascinated on what that 5-year process entailed and what you got from that.
Well, it was still Well, it's funny because I suppose it culminated in 2016, 2011 to 2016, and it finished with working with Eddie and a Grand Slam. But the 4 years before that weren't as perfect. Actually resulted in me getting banned for the home World Cup. But I suppose I left that tournament, and that tournament was a Rugby World Cup, and it was the only Rugby World Cup I ended up going to, because I got banned for 2 others and I got injured for another. So I had opportunity to go to them, and when I look back on my career, I should have respected that more. And at the time when I went, I didn't respect it. I was young, free and single. Not single, I had my girlfriend, but that sort of blasé attitude to life. You know, I was professional, I was doing what I loved. I was back in New Zealand, my home country, and we're at a major sporting tournament. But like, my role models, I suppose, at the time, and I'm not blaming anyone because I was very much a sheep, but team sport, when the majority of the team's doing one thing, I was the majority, you know. I went with the team. But there was people like Johnny Wilkinson in that team, and I'm just thinking, maybe if I'd spent a bit more time with Johnny, like whenever I get the chance to talk to Johnny now, like I always leave with something, you know. I always feel better, or I've learned something from talking to him. And I suppose 2011, I was at an age where all my mates were in the team, all similar young kind of group, and we trained hard, we played hard, but we also partied hard, and in our downtime, we just enjoyed ourselves. But there's a few things that happened at that Rugby World Cup which left me feeling that my fingerprints were on, that left me feeling not embarrassed, but just not I didn't feel good about it. Like, I didn't respect the tournament, you know, like for what it was. And when I look back on my career, I was right. You know, so I got in a little bit of trouble off the field, not through any wrongdoing, just doing what the group were doing, you know. It was usually around alcohol, because that's what we did back in 2011. It's only 10, 11 years ago, but it was just the way it was. And I suppose I left that environment saying I shouldn't mix business with pleasure as much. After that, I treated rugby very much as business. I still enjoyed my downtime and did the team thing, but I kept it to a level where I suppose I had more control, more balance to that. And then we went on a 4-year journey, I suppose, as that team. And it coincided with Stuart Lancaster coming in, overtaking the team, and then swinging the sort of balance completely the other way. So there was a no alcohol policy. There was kind of no fun. You know, it was very much a teacher-student relationship. And effectively, that's what he got on the field. He got a whole lot of students, kids, you know, whereas rugby internationally is a man's game. You need people to think for themselves. But hey-ho, either way, that 4 years, that went by, and I was far more diligent and professional and aware, because we were building to an England Rugby World Cup at Twickenham, you know. And I really did apply myself in that time. But I suppose this is where, like, team environments, I felt constricted. I couldn't be myself. And it probably didn't get the best out of me. Whereas the previous environment was too loose, and I could be myself, but too much. It's like I had too many little birdies on my shoulder, and then it went back the other way, and I couldn't be myself. It was like James Haskell couldn't be himself, and Chris Ashton couldn't be himself. And then the environment, I didn't want to spend time on my down days with the England Rugby team. I just want to go home, back to Northampton, where I was appreciated, and I was almost reading off the hymn sheet. You know, I was doing what I was told. And that didn't go well in the end. So I get banned for the 2015 World Cup, and that hurt because I'd experienced 4 years under Jono, basically partying, enjoying being a young professional. Then they had that 2011 experience, and I thought, right, I'm going to shape up now. I'm going to target this next World Cup. I'm going to win a World Cup, and I'm going to become an English rugby legend with the rest of the boys, and I'm going to take this very seriously. Tried that, but the environment, I didn't flourish, and I didn't enjoy as much. And then ultimately I got banned for it. I didn't really do anything. Jamie George was down there. I just scored a try, and I celebrated with my head on his head, you know, like a come on sort of moment. And it was deemed as a headbutt. And I think if you talk to Jamie, both of us would agree it wasn't a headbutt. It was an over exuberant celebration. And in the context of Saracens, Northampton, me, Jamie, it was just one of those one-upmanship. It was nothing. But I got banned for that 2015 World Cup, and then I was like, shit. So I've worked 4 years for this. I've actually thought about this for 4 years, and I'm now not going to take part. But then I had my daughter, and it's like when you have your first child, nothing else mattered.
Yeah, the best.
And then Eddie rings up after England get knocked out of that World Cup, didn't even make it out of the pool, and it was like a failure, And Eddie said, "You want to come be the captain of the England Rugby team? Your fingerprints haven't been on that tournament." So I'm like, sliding doors. It worked out pretty good. And then you meet Eddie as this coach. I'd had a really loose environment, a really tight environment. And then he just had this make your own choices environment. He put beers on the table. He's like, if you want a beer, have a beer. If you want some cake, have cake. We had things like tomato sauce taken off the table. Like when you live in a 5-star hotel, spa hotel, it's not a 5-star spa hotel. It's like a prison, So you look for any sort of enjoyment or little lift that can. And when tomato sauce goes for some of the boys, when you got like, I don't know, everyone has tomato sauce just as a
bit of sugar, but
but like that was taken off the menu. It's like
I spoke to Hask about that. He was talking about he'd walk around with the I can't remember the book now. It's the San Francisco 49ers head coach book.
Not Bill.
Yeah.
Belichick.
No, that's the Patriots one. It is Bill something. Anyway,
okay.
It'd walk around that, which was like old school tactics of all of that, restricting people really. But maybe you need that in NFL. I don't know. But it's funny, isn't it? Because after that 2011 World Cup, you'd already made the decision yourself. So then to have it forced on you, it's a different feeling, isn't it? Whereas Eddie's empowered you to make the decision, albeit, if you turn up and your skin fold isn't at the right level, you get sent home.
This is the thing, right? Like the power of choice. If you tell someone they can't have something or do something. So I'll make that an example. Davey Wilson, the guy who tackled me out here, ended my career, right? Big tight head prop from Newcastle. He tattooed his own Nike tick into his leg when he was drunk once. Unbelievable guy. We call him the Moose, mate. He's a legend. He's had it tattooed over now. But either way,
Shoe Dog will be happy with that.
Yeah, unbelievable, mate. So I saw him one night under Stuart Lancaster's regime, coming back from the M&S down the road with the mountain of a man walking up the path in the dark with 2 bags, and it's full of contraband, biscuits, cookies, biscuits, same thing, cakes, Percy pigs, the lot. But it's because we weren't allowed it. So he goes out and makes a choice. The same thing with me, day off. Oh, I'm going to go to Costa on the way home, and I'm going to smash a tiffin, get hold of stuff. But then Eddie comes in, do what you want. You guys want a drink? He put wine on the tables. He put beers on the tables. If you want to have one, have one. All of a sudden, people come and have a glass of wine with dinner or a beer, and it's like normalised. But if you want to have it, equally with puddings, he used to put puddings on the table, and I'd know with my skin folds, probably not the best for me, but to partake socially, I'm going to have a slither because I feel like I'm, and then I don't go back to my room and go to the shops and buy stuff. Yeah. Give people the choice to do the right thing. And I think food, especially, so alcohol and sweet, is so important for morale in that environment because you're there for so long. And you think, how many times in a day do you actually get to connect with your missus and kid?
I mean, in a weekday, it's limited.
But where is it? For me, it's the dinner table.
Oh, yeah.
So for us, where people have got different schedules, left, right, training, bang, 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 100 miles an hour, the only time you stop in the day scheduled for recovery is food and rest. Yeah. Rest you do by yourself. Food is where we connect. That's where we go, how's the missus? How's the kids? How many kids you got? 1, 2? Okay, cool. Is she doing all right? Not so good. Oh, you should try this. Or, hey, that line out that we fucked up today. So you can talk about work. So much more can happen here. So the one thing I did, I'm really happy I did it, I banned these at the table.
Nice.
It was like 10 press-ups if you're on your phone. Eddie did them, management did them, and we created a culture where food became so important. Sitting down around the table was key. We got so much more done, so much more bonding. And part of that is things like beers. Like, first coach I've ever seen that goes, mate, I think we need a social. We're in Kensington, the fellow week. He's like, right, we're going to split the guys into 4 groups. We've got 4 pubs lined up for you. But the guys go, they know they've got training tomorrow. They probably have 1, 2 pints. Get like looseners, Guys having a chat, probably going to have a third. And then it's like, oh, we'll call it now. No one kicks on. No one, they just have it's just give people the power of choice. It's like the bloody vax. I don't want to get into anti-vax and pro-vax, but if you tell people to do something, they don't want to do it. Give them the choice, educate them.
Yeah. It's funny. It's almost going back to that non-conformist, what we were talking about, isn't it? It's like when you are forced to do something, the non-conformist goes, fuck off.
Yeah.
I'm not being told what to do. I can make my own decisions.
Or let me ever think about it.
Yeah.
I'll do that now because I've thought about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's maybe that's him educating people to think for themselves. And then on the rugby field, like it's a bit deeper, but I felt like one regime compared to the other couldn't make decisions for themselves. They're kind of looking to the box, like help us. Whereas Eddie's team was very much.
And that's again, we talk about society. Most of us are looking externally, like help me, like because it is chaos. A lot of, especially the last couple of years. So everyone's looking externally rather than having the confidence to just go, no, I can make decisions for myself or look after myself. That's why we'll talk about this later. But in coaching, pure coaching, in the sense we were talking about before, it's only ever questions. It's never advice. Advice is mentorship. Pure coaching is the emphasis is on the client. So
if you're the coach, you're kind of getting them to
just deepening the awareness. So it's just serving up another question and letting you think about it, make your own decision, make your own mind up about it.
Because this is right. Like, they often have the answer, right? It's just showing them and getting it out of them, right? Yeah, I get that. Yes, that's good.
Last one, mate. And then
I thought, okay, that's cool. I'm all right. You got to go home after this.
You're all right for one more?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, last one. So, you also said we're products of our experience, right? Most of us are, who we are today is the things that have happened to us in the past, which shape us, and that's how we identify as who we are. So what would be the standout 2 or 3 things that have shaped you? You said we are the products of our experience. What are those experiences that have shaped you?
I think an upbringing in New Zealand. That Rotorua, where I grew up, is kind of like low socioeconomic, sort of blue collar. It's a great tourist destination. Kind of Maori mythology and legend is all based there. So, like, in terms of like diversity and culture, I felt like didn't feel like a minority, but I feel like knowledge is power. Like I learned about different cultures from an early age, and I embraced them. I was part of it. So I felt like that experience growing up there, and everything from like the classic Kiwi barefoot lifestyle, going to school bare feet, trying to find your shoes on day 4, catching the bus at 5 years old at the bottom of the road. The road I grew up on was a gravel road, like loose gravel, and 45 to an hour bus ride to school every day. As a 5-year-old, I went with my big brother. Mum didn't take us. It was just like. So like the whole experience of like a Kiwi upbringing, a bit more in terms of outdoor education, worldly education, which is ironic that they're kind of isolated down there in the thing, but like it's a far more sort of outgoing, outdoorsy sort of environment. And I think that coupled with the sort of the cultural aspects that I grew up with, the schooling aspects, the people and all that sort of stuff, that for me is formative. And the only reason it is formative is because I left it. I reckon if I stay in it, I wouldn't be sat here going, I wouldn't be talking to you for a start, but I wouldn't say it was defining, because my whole life would have been that. There's no change. So you need comparison to change. So I think then moving here, realising I was a bit different, but then I think some of those earlier experiences made me successful here because they're instilled. A good work ethic from my parents, talking to people, understanding different cultures made me successful here, ultimately a passion playing rugby. So I'd say, firstly, growing up in New Zealand, everything to do with it, then moving here and using everything that I'd learned in New Zealand to maximise my opportunity here, which I felt like I did. And then I'd say the third step of that is probably family, like wife, children, buying into like that whole, like I love it. Like family's the best thing I've ever done. I wish I'd done it earlier, but you can't wish that because probably wasn't mature enough to do it then. It happens when it happens, right? And if anything, it's like that happened when I was still playing rugby, and I've been waiting. I had my daughter on a Monday, and I went to the birth here at Northampton General, and then Tuesday I was back at training, and I just played at the weekend, and it didn't really sell. You know, it was like, oh, cool, but got back on the grind. You know,
Yeah.
and I felt like for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, my missus like waited for me politely. You know, we missed funerals, weddings, christenings, because I was always playing at the weekend. And I think this is where it comes down to being successful. Maybe in the time I came through was that mental resilience to just focus on rugby. It was I put it before my wife, you know, or my girlfriend at the time. Like, can we go out for dinner this week? Well, I don't want to go out after Wednesday. I want Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in bed. And if we go out Monday, Tuesday, like if it's getting like near 11 o'clock, we're out of there. You know what I mean? So like starved of like living a life in a way. And I suppose this ties into the third phase of the three things you asked me for, the liberation of retiring. So having a family, and then like we're on our first family holiday over New Year's, never done that. I've always played over New Year's. It's like the liberation of now choosing what I want to do, where I want to go every day. Do I want to train every day? Yeah, I do. So I do it. Do I want to eat that? I can, because skin folds don't need to be down, but I need to do the work to. But then like just with work, opportunity, where do I want to live in the world? You know, what do I want to do with my life from here on out? I think that stage, I don't know if I answered your question, but if I could break it into three sort of things, I think I answered your question with the first two.
No, it's great.
The third one's a bit different.
No, it is because it is.
It's almost like looking forward in a way. Like,
but that kind of started when you became a dad, didn't it? Although you were still within the rugby world and still making sacrifices, it changes you drastically and dramatically.
Yeah. So like, I'll tell you, everyone talks about the why.
Yeah.
The why.
Yeah.
It talks about loads now, which I think is cool. Like the why is cool. It's like a deeper meaning, you know. But the why for me at 16, 17, 18 was to be a professional rugby player, to earn money, to play in the great stadiums, to play against my heroes, the people that I grew up watching, to make a name for myself, to achieve. You know, I wanted to be a high achiever. I wanted to do it. I wanted to be, wanted my family to acknowledge me. I wanted, you know, what's the word? Like, you just want credit, you know. Validation, yeah. I think, so at that age I wanted that. And then once I'd done it, it became very much business-like. It was like, right, I'm here now. I want to stay here because, you know, I earn well from it. I enjoy it. Like, the experience is cool. Like, once you play for England, I didn't want to come back and just play for club. Like, you always want to play for England because that level of competition is way better. The environments that you're in are way better. Financially, it's way better. There's so much more to playing for England than your club, so you want to stay there. So that was my why. Yeah. And then I have kids, and it's like, this is while I'm still playing. And Eddie throws me that bone as well. So it's like, you can make something of your career. You can be remembered. You can win a Rugby World Cup. You can go down in history. And I'm thinking, okay, it goes back to validation again, legacy. Like, what do I want my kids to think? Because if I look back on what I've done as a player, I don't really want my kids to think that was just dad, you know, all the bands and the discipline. And then all of a sudden, like, you see guys do it now with their kids at a game, they get them on the field after the game. Like, it means something. Don't see them all week, and then they come to a game. It's like, this is what dad does it for. And little fuckers don't know that. Like, you're putting the time in so they get a good inheritance or good opportunities or exposure, you know. But I think for me, my why became my kids. So I always used to think about trying to make my parents proud when I played. But then at the end, I was like, make my wife and my kids proud. But they've got no idea, you know what I mean? So I think it kind of changes throughout your career, just like your influences change. You know what I mean?
Mate, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm probably talking too much, mate.
No,
but good
mate,
coffee, to be fair. Not bad for the old pod.
Yeah, mate, that was amazing. Thanks so much,
mate.
I loved watching you as a player, and
Thanks.
It's been such a pleasure having a chat all about it. And yeah, mate, thanks for sorting this out. This has been amazing. It's something I'll remember for a long time. So I appreciate it,
Mate, thank you. Good luck with the pod.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers.
This is Take Flights with Mark Whittle.